Indeed. What's up, everyone, and welcome to Across the Gridiron. And I am very excited today. We've got a really exciting show. And today I'm so excited to have a co-host. It's been me doing this solo, but this is a new era for Across the Gridiron. And I just want to introduce, this gentleman is just someone that I absolutely, absolutely adore. It's not, it's, it's funny though because he supports some of the teams in the United Kingdom, and you're probably going to hear that come out, a few times in the show as we kind of, run through this. But he's a diehard Sheffield Wednesday supporter, so you can see the Sheffield, in the back there as well. But he's gonna be throwing down some insights. He's gonna be throwing some hot takes. He's gonna be, basically we're gonna have fun with this. We're gonna have fun with this. And he's a diehard Dolphins fan, even though I'm not quite sure like why he's still a Dolphins fan.
Hey, no am I, Eddie. No am I.
But I'm glad to have him. Matt, how are you? How are you doing? Welcome to the Cross the Gridiron.
Eddie, look, thanks, mate. First of all, pleasure to be here. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's been an NFL fan for oh, best part of 20 odd years now.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you said, unfortunately, my team is Miami Dolphins. I was going to do this later, but I may as well just
Oh my goodness. No,
there we
he's
go.
got the
Yeah,
hands.
I'm putting my Miami Dolphins hat on already. Starters we mean to go on, but no, but no, I've watched your videos. I love what you do. But obviously, we've been good friends for a long time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And yes, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we're off to a flyer, right? Already got the Dolphin hats there. So we know that is going to be interesting going forward. But let's just dive in, right? The NFL Week 9 was an absolute blast. Let me just get right into the Dallas Cowboys struggles. Because
Yeah.
I don't really understand what's going on. Is the Cowboy season over?
Do you want the short answer or the long answer? Um, I mean, look, the short answer is yes. I mean, like you, last week's game was billed by the Cowboys themselves as a must win, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but let's start by looking at some of the positives. It was one of the statistically the best rushing game that you've had this season. And I also read today that in a recent fan poll, only 3% of fans thought it was the worst game of the season. Right. So, progress, right?
Progress,
Progress.
yes.
But I think it was the famous Bill Parcells who once said, "You're only as good as your record."
Yes.
Now that is showing to be not true because you are worse than your
Turn
record,
out good. Yeah,
my friend.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's it. I mean, don't if you don't believe me, listen to what I think we all saw that video of Dak Prescott on the sidelines giving what he really thinks
yeah, yep, yep,
of
yep.
the Cowboys over the course of the game. And look, I mean, that was it. I mean, the game was awful. Blocking was poor.
Yeah,
The Atlanta have really struggled applying pressure this season, yet they sacked Dak 3 times.
yep.
The play calling and execution was poor. I mean, there was that disastrous 4-1 that you
Oof.
somehow managed to lose 3 yards on a 4-1.
Oh,
And but then you compare it to what Atlanta did when I think they had a 4-3,
yeah,
yet they scored a touchdown from it.
yeah,
Now, the best thing about that was obviously when I think Mooney was running for the touchdown, and you've got Diggs standing there with his arms out, saying, "Where the hell is everybody?" It's
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's poor. I mean, the most frustrating thing though, and we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about the Dolphins,
yeah.
just the indiscipline.
It
You
is.
can't give
Oof.
away that many pre-snap penalties and not get punished.
Yeah. Listen, right. I can't disagree with anything you've said there. The Cowboys were awful. And pre-snap penalties is become a normal thing for the Dallas Cowboys. Actually, it's become a normal thing since Mike McCarthy became the coach. Losing yards by self-inflicted indiscipline. The Cowboys were not good. And I think the Cowboys, right, you can tell like if they don't get like 3 or 4 yards in the first down, then you know that they are potentially not going to make it, right?
Mhm.
They're a team that needs to be constantly ahead in the stakes. And listen, right now, the Cowboys only have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, and every team knows that, right? You
Mhm.
know, teams that are coming to play the Cowboys know if you get CeeDee out of the game, don't let him touch the ball in the first quarter, right? Because that takes him out of the game. And I think a lot has to go back to Jerry Jones, right? The way that he set up the team at the start of the season, because everyone was talking about, Derrick Henry, for example. He was in Dallas. He was saying he wanted to go to the Cowboys,
Mhm.
but we decided to bring Zeke back. And how ironic that this game Zeke was actually inactive due to indiscipline. And for me, the sort of self-sabotaging is not just on the pitch. I think it's outside of the pitch as well. With Jerry Jones meddling with the Cowboys affairs, and I'm sure Mike McCarthy has been instructed that Zeke has to play. So all of these things just show that the Cowboys are a team that would always promise to deliver, but never actually, get to the promised land. And it is frustrating, really is frustrating, for everyone, concerned with the Dallas Cowboys. And listen, they got their ass kicked by Atlanta. I was worried it could have been more. They kept the game close, so it looks deceptively close, but I think you watch that game and you know that it was anything but close.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I mean, you mentioned a couple of interesting bits there. I just want to call you up on. You said that you rely on Zeke, you rely on Dak Prescott and you rely on CeeDee Lamb, both potentially out, right?
Yeah.
Prescott's going on the IR. He's going to be out for at least 4 games, and Lamb was feeling his shoulder, I think, quite a
Yeah.
bit towards the back end of that game. So you're potentially going to lose your two biggest weapons, right?
Yeah.
So that's obviously a big decision. You talk about Jerry Jones, right? I mean, the one thing I think you guys almost needed to do is almost just take your medicine and just keep things a little bit quiet,
Yeah.
certainly over the trade deadline,
Yeah. Yeah.
and instead, was it Jonathan Mingo, right? I'm sure we can talk a little bit about that, but that trade makes no sense
It
to
makes no
to, to me.
sense.
It makes no sense to me at all. I mean, you bring someone. I mean, look, the Panthers have been the whipping boys for a couple of years now. He's he's was fourth on the depth chart at wide
Yep.
receiver,
Yep.
right? Zero, and I've got some stats on him. Like 19 starts, zero touchdowns, less than 1 yard per route this season. In both seasons, sorry, that he's played. I just sometimes think that sometimes being quiet and letting things play out is probably just the best route. But no, again, we had to go and make a splash. You had to go and get a trade on the deadline, and it doesn't sound good. And you in terms of you don't it's not looking particularly great for the draft either.
No.
You got seventh round pick, but you got rid of a fourth.
Yeah.
It didn't really make much sense. And I think that if the question you're going to ask me is where do I see the Cowboys going? How do I think this season's going to go? I think it's fair to say you're on life support. I think it's fair to say for this season. I mean, you spent all this money on Prescott. He's had a middling season. He's still one of your biggest weapons, of
Yeah.
course. He's one of the best QBs in the league on his day, but he's now going to be out for 4 games. Cooper Rush is who's going to come in. He's been a decent stand-in for you guys in the past. I think he went 5-1 last season when he was
He
standing in,
did. He did.
so not bad. But then Trey Lance behind him,
Yeah.
who was it through like 48 interceptions in a preseason game or whatever it was.
He
Slightly
didn't look
percentage, I
very
think it is now.
promising. It didn't look
Yes.
very promising.
No. So yeah, I mean, it's look, it's a tough one to call, and I'm sure. I mean, you talking about the Cowboys on this podcast is almost quite cathartic, I imagine. It's like listening to any football podcast here in the UK with Gary Neville. He has to mention Man United. No matter what episode we do, you're going to have to mention the Cowboys somewhere.
Ah,
But there's not many places for you to go, unfortunately.
Listen, you're absolutely right. The season is dead. I think Dak Prescott, going out, I think that was it. CD going out, that was also it as well. And we faced the Eagles. I know we're going to talk about that later on, but do you know what? Should we just move on from the Cowboys, right? Let's
if you will.
let's move on from the Cowboys. Some other interesting things happened in the league, right? I think you saw something, in that Eagles game, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think NFL has become a very stats-driven sport, and I think
Yeah,
the way that fans watch the games, interact with the games, understanding the game is very, very stats heavy, and it's the same with a lot of sport here in the UK now as well. But sometimes there are certain plays that you forget all about the stats. You just trust what your eyes are saying, and you step back and went, "Holy, what have I just seen?" And I think everyone watching this probably know what we're talking about. Shaquan Barkley. I mean, that was just an unreal bit of athleticism. Still don't really know how he did that.
I
How
don't.
he's
I'm
still
not.
actually walking in the
I'm
morning
not
without getting
sure you
sprung.
can
Like,
replicate that, even if
no,
you tried.
no, I'd break my back 4 times over if I tried that. But no, it was just a ridiculous show of athleticism, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about him and how he compares to other running backs. But the thing that makes me sad, I just can't believe that the Giants traded him.
Oh,
It's
oh,
like you have a
oh,
choice. I know you've got to sit within rules, but you've got Daniel Jones, you've got Shaquan Barkley. You can only pay one of them, right? You choose Daniel Jones. Now
yeah,
I know every team up and down the league will always prioritize their QB, right?
yeah,
They
yeah,
get the ball on every single snap, every single play. Running backs don't. But you have a potential face of the franchise. He's a local New York. He's a New York kid. And not only do you trade him to the Eagles,
yeah.
like divisional rivals. They're like the team you love to hate the most. It's crazy by the Giants, but I know we're not here to talk about it. But every time I
It,
see Bartley putting up stats and you see
yeah.
the Giants who have been middling to poor to awful for the past few seasons, and you just say, oh, what could have been?
It's bordering on malpractice, right? And there was a time, right, when people used to say that, Saquon Barkley, there was this big debate about Saquon Barkley and Zeke Elliott, who was the better running back,
Hmm.
and because he was in the Giants, everyone used to kind of think, well, he's good, but he's not all of that. And then people used to talk about Alvin Kamara, you know, all the other running backs back then, it was always like, is Saquon Barkley really it? But it just shows, right, how a team can almost kind of reflect on the quality of the players, right? Which is
Mm.
why it's always a very difficult thing to just isolate a player and just say whether he's, great or amazing, right, without the context of the team. Because
Oh,
Saquon
100%.
Barkley, has looked like an out of the world running back since he went to the Eagles, right? And every single game, it's like he's gonna get 100 yards, and it's a question of is he gonna get 150? Is he gonna get close to a 200, right? And it makes me think, about Derrick Henry, right? Because we also knew Derrick Henry was a stud, right? At the Titans. He used to bulldoze people. He was famous for the stiff arm, that literally pushes you away, and he just bulldozes you. And he goes to the Ravens, right? For me, I just feel like that's unfair. Like, I mean, what do you think about those two running backs? Like, Saquon Barkley looks like he's getting better, even with age compared to, other running back. And the same thing with Derek Henry because they're not young running backs. You would expect typically younger running backs to be getting the spotlight.
I think you're looking at potentially two of the best have ever done it. Let's be honest. I mean, you've got King Henry is still putting up numbers, which is unreal for a man of his experience. And we'll talk more about it, I'm sure, because we'll spoiler alert. We'll talk about Lamar Jackson later. But what he has brought to the Ravens has it sort of transformed a team who were one of the better teams in the AFC, but can never actually, but really struggle to get beyond sort of the depths of the playoffs because it basically
Yeah,
you have Lamar Jackson has to carry them himself. You've got someone Derrick Henry opens up that entire offense,
it
right?
does.
And it's as you said, it is slightly unfair on the rest of on the rest of it, but yeah. So he's obviously a fantastic player. And then you look about it, and these two guys are the top two favorites to be the offensive player of the year,
Yeah,
right? In terms of your running backs, they are number one and number two in your fantasy. If you guys are into your fantasy,
yeah.
I'm not, but I still watch. Still, I don't have time for the fantasy football, but they are your number one and your number two. Um, and you look at, I looked at some of the stats early today, not just in terms of where Henry and Barkley are this year. Henry is ahead of obviously all sort of your main rushing stats,
Yeah,
attempts, yard attempts, long touchdowns, all this kind of stuff. But you look at where Barkley is now after say his first 6 years versus where Henry is. And again, Henry is ahead on all of your key rushing metrics. Obviously, what Barkley gives you is a potential second weapon on the receiving side because he can
yeah,
he's available as a receiver more. He gets more. He's targeted more in that way.
yeah.
But you're looking at two fantastic receivers, and it's as I said, it's bordering on malpractice what Giants did. Eagles take him, love him, use him. He's gonna give you a great chance to playoffs and beyond. And but King Henry, I mean, he's called the king for a reason, and
Yes.
you know he opens up the AFC
He
completely.
does, he does. And I think that, the Ravens, with him now have a chance because we all know that everyone has to go through Mahomes, to get to the Super Bowl. But if you've got a running game that is lethal, right? So you're the opposing player and you're standing there and both of them, are in formation and you're beginning to think, right, okay, do we go for do we go for Henry? Do we go for Lamar? And then what that means to the likes of Zay Flowers just absolutely goes crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
This was another game that he had over 100 yards, right?
yep.
So as a weapon right now, I think for me, I I love Henry, but I just love Saquon Barkley's splash plays. He's got that wow factor for me. Like he can do something that is a bit nifty. I mean, Henry will bulldoze you, right? Once he gets into his mojo, you can't stop him, right?
Mhm.
But Saquon Barkley can shift. He can do some moves. Like look at what he did last week. Like, he did the shimmy, spun the player around, and then did the back, huddle, over the player. I mean, that was ridiculous. Like that looked like you know, game mode, was accelerated. Someone just said, put on game mode, right? And he just went absolutely crazy. And the coolest thing about it, he didn't even make it look like it was a big deal. Like you
Of
saw him
course.
like walking into the sideline and people are like doing this, and he's like, oh, okay, this is just another day in the office.
Yeah, it is. You've seen a video of his teammates' reactions on the sideline to when he did that. I
Yeah,
mean, they couldn't believe it. I mean, look, I think you're right. I think look, Derrick Henry is he's a machine,
yeah,
right? He is, he will run through you all game. And I don't think he expected to play as much as he has done so far. I, you know, I said some of the feeling was when the Baltimore signed him that he would be used as sort of like an end of season
yeah,
player,
yeah,
saving for the playoffs. The way that Kansas obviously used Kelsey for argument's
yeah,
sakes,
yeah,
but no, he said no. If you're here, you're playing. You knock over all these teams in front of you. But Barkley does have that kind of. You're right. He's more flashy. He's more the showman. I say flashy in a good way. He is more of a showman. He does give you that holy s kind of
yeah,
hands on your head
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Henry's not. Henry's just going to punch you in the mouth as he runs
yeah,
past you,
yeah,
and and it's hard. It's hard. again, you if you look at pure stats, you look at Henry. If
Yeah.
you look at Showman, what he brings to the
Yeah.
game, that's I said. That's
Yeah.
why I said sometimes football is what you see and it's what you enjoy. That's what sport's all about. It's not all about stats and yards and completions and targets. You can drown in those stats.
Yeah.
Football, soccer, whatever, and all these other sports. A lot of it's all about enjoyment, and
Yeah.
Bartley brings that to the table.
He certainly does. But a team that doesn't bring enjoyment, because we've got to talk about your Dolphins, right? I mean, I don't want to just go with the pain on my own, but I mean, I have to look at the Dolphins, and there was so much promise, you've got to say. When you had Tyreek Hill, coming, last season, and then you're thinking to yourself, right, okay, you know what, Tyreek is coming, Tua, it seems like, it almost like what happened with Josh Allen when, Diggs, Stephon Diggs went to the Bills. It almost kind of took Josh Allen to another level. And we saw a similar thing for Tua, right? Tua, it was now a combination. You got Waddle, you've got Tyreek Hill, and it was pick your poison, right? Right. And but it just seems like, Tua has now become injury prone, right? Which means that the Dolphins need to make some decisions. But that was a painful game, right? The one yes, last weekend, against the Bills, right? Because this is a division opponent, and you think that, based on the fact that you build for opponents in your division that I was expecting the Dolphins to have a little bit more of a showing, and I think they did, but at the end of the day there was just that little bit that the Bills had.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally try and be a glass half full type of
Yeah,
fan in general, or at least try and be a realist. And let's look at it. We haven't won at Orchard Park now since 2015, right? Tua's never won there, right?
yeah,
Allen I think he's like 12 and won 12 and lost three against the Dolphins, right? So we are, you know, we are not at sort of that sort of same level. Allen 13-2. Allen's record is against the Dolphins. It's crazy. But you look at it and you think, okay, sometimes you just got to hold your hands up and say, beaten by the better team,
yeah.
right? You've got to who is coming back from an injury, and look, every time the guy dives in head first.
I'm always like this. I
Yeah,
literally
I'm like,
I'm always like
good God. I mean, protect yourself, man. I mean, slide. Learn to
slide, yeah.
slide. Don't go head first. But I mean, you look at that. I mean, look, the fact is we're now on a losing streak of three, right?
Yeah,
You know, but given what sort of come before, I think we can be relatively pleased or satisfied with how the game went. Look,
yeah,
um, we offensively I thought we were fine, 373 yards. We've scored the most points in our games. We've sort of tied for most games, most points per
points
game
in the
as
game.
we got for the
Yeah,
rest of the season.
yeah,
And if it wasn't for, again, going back to what we said about with the Cowboys, if it wasn't for a daft penalty for necessary roughness with 46 seconds to go,
yeah,
and you're heading to overtime, if it isn't for a record-breaking kick by one of the most inconsistent kickers in the league,
yeah,
61 yards to
yeah,
win the game. If it wasn't for that, I mean, I reckon a lot of the team would have taken, okay, yeah, they can try a 61-yard field goal for that. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine. We're going into overtime, but it wasn't to be. I mean, Tua was, he was pretty near faultless in that game.
yeah,
232 yards, 25 out of 28, two touchdowns, no interceptions. He had his longest ever drive in his career in this game at
yeah,
97
yeah,
yards.
yeah,
So he, there are positives to take out of that. You talk about Tyreek Hill. There was a lot of talk about him moving,
yeah,
being traded on the deadline. Whether I think 49ers were rumored to him, Chargers were rumored to him, but he stayed put.
yeah.
Um, but we're 2-6. We are 4 games behind Buffalo. It's the division of one at the moment.
Yeah, it is.
Buffalo are really going to have to, piss the bed, so to
Yeah.
speak, in order to not win that division. So
Yeah.
we have to be near perfect, right? We have to go 8-1 as a minimum for the rest of the season, and
Yeah.
then we need help from elsewhere. We're
Yeah.
playing for that wild card place, and the one thing I think that we've got the players to do it.
You
But
do.
what we don't have, and what we've never had, is the consistency to do it.
Yeah.
I can see us going 7-2, 6-3 for the rest of the season, but I can't see us going 8-1 or
Mm.
9-0. Even if we do, there's going to be somewhere else. And I think we just have to look at it as the one positive again is that you've heard and you've may have even debated on your show in the past, people talking about Tua. Oh, is he
Yeah.
really that good? Oh, he's just a
Yeah.
system
Yeah.
quarterback.
Yeah.
He's not that great. You take him out of that team, and oh my God, you saw what you
You're
saw
awful.
what you saw what difference it made.
You are
And again,
awful.
yeah, going back to the Cowboys, you're gonna take Prescott out for 4 games. It'll be interesting to see when you put someone like Cooper Rush in. I know
Yeah.
we said earlier he had a decent record last season, but the thing is, with a quarterback position, almost more than any, if you have a franchise quarterback, everything is built around them. You take
Yes.
that key cog out, the next man up is normally such a drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to look past. So look, positive result, bad. Divisional losing division rival is always bad.
Yeah.
But you look at it in a context, I think it's just you get sometimes you got to hold your hand up, being by the better team.
Yeah, I mean, and it is unfortunate, right? Because, like you said, I think the Dolphins have got players. HN is a good running back. I mean, he
Yeah,
combined for over 100 yards, both receiving and rushing. In that game. I mean, Tua had 89% completion. In the game. So, I mean, if you have 89% completion for your quarterback, and the Bills are a good team, you
very
know
good team.
that that tells me something about the team. But again, it's the unforced errors. It's those little things that, Bill Belichick used to master this. He was in your division. He used to master this. They would not give you anything, right? They're not going to make mistakes. They're going to not, they're going to use the rules against you. Those things like substitution, 12 men on the field, all of those little tricks, that good teams do just to get that edge, just to win the game.
It's the dark arts to get
That's
those
how I
marginal gains,
got.
or housery, as we often call it here in
Yes,
the.
yes.
Um,
The S
yeah, I mean,
housery.
Bill Belichick was the master of that, and look, it's not a part of the game that I like, so I'd rather
Yeah,
us not resort to those tactics. But
yeah,
you're right, you've got to be consistent. You have to take your chances when you get them, and I think that you're going into overtime against the divisional rivals. You haven't won
yeah,
in 2 games. You've got your star QB back. If offensively you're looking good. Unnecessary roughness. 46 seconds to go. You go from a potential. I think it was on third down, so you're potentially
yeah,
looking at a punt return. All of a sudden,
yeah,
you've automatically given a first down,
yeah,
right? And it's just it's things like that, and it's in every sport. Whether you look at our football, silly giving away silly free kicks, silly penalties, silly bookings, red
yeah,
cards.
yeah,
And it's things like that. There's a fan, it drives you up the wall,
yeah,
and it will drive the coach up the wall. I mean, Daniels would have been working really hard in his team to try and turn this around.
yeah, yeah.
And a moment like that, look, it's one of these things. Penalties, it's part of the sport as well.
The only
One of these
thing I
things.
can say, is that the Bills have a history, right, of having a wobble, during the season, right? So sometimes they start off hot and then, in the stretch they limp into the playoffs, and sometimes they start off cold and then they get hot, so maybe that's one thing you can look at and say, well, have they gotten hot too quickly? And it's that cold, coming. But again, you guys are not a cold weather team, so
Oh
so
God, no.
so
I think a
so
lot of the team still left their fingers at Kansas City last year in the playoffs.
uh
It's
uh yeah,
that was a
yeah,
hard watch, but
yeah,
even harder to play in. But look, I mean, look, at the end of the day, they've got Josh Allen, right? He is going to be up there, in my opinion, still as as an MVP candidate
Yeah.
at the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
He's an exceptional QB, and you've always got a chance to win if you've got someone like that in your team. And yeah, we've got Tua, who's probably just maybe a step down from
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know, elite future Hall of Fame level at the
Yeah.
moment. If he can stay fit, I think he's got the potential to get up there. But yeah, look, it is what it is. It's again, if I said that the Cowboys are on life support, um, we it's the longest of long shots, I would say,
Yeah.
for us to
Yeah.
get into the playoffs, but it's still there, and I think that's why we've kept Hill. I
Yeah.
think if we were 7-1 or 1-7, sorry, I
Yeah.
think they probably would have maybe looked to trade Hill. And I think
Yeah.
there are a lot of playoff teams who would have, or playoff chasing teams who probably would have taken him, and we could have used that to get off the wage bill, to get a good draft pick, hopefully for next year. But if obviously the franchise think that we've still got a shout at the playoffs, it's worth
Yeah.
keeping him because your team is a lot worse without him.
Yeah.
We'd have to. I mean, we could have got Jonathan Monge or whatever it was instead.
Yeah. 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 You could have.
We
You
could
could
have
have.
got him.
You could have. So, hey, listen, I think it was a good decision to keep him because I think, if it's a playoff caliber team, they're going to be late. You're going to be picking late anyway,
Oh yeah,
because, so sometimes you kind of say, well, is that draft pick gonna, for me, like if it's like if you're getting like a second round pick, right, or a first round or two first round picks, so potentially you've got this next draft and you've got another draft, which I think Tyreek Hill is at least a first round pick, kind of player, to go. But